Hello, everyone. You should be here for the Confidently Present Your Qualitative Results chapter. We'll get started in a moment. Just giving everyone a chance to get here, and 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock Eastern to hit. Hoping everyone's doing well. All right, it is about that time, so let's begin. Hello, everyone. Once again, I am Dr. Joanna Broussard. I am the qualitative mentor here at Statistics Solutions, and we are a full-service dissertation support company. This is the webinar, Confidently Present Your Qualitative Results chapter. Now, this is a fairly detailed presentation, so I just want to let you guys know that I will not probably be able to have time to answer individual questions specifically about your individual research. We should be able to answer some general questions about the topics. I will have both the webinar chat up and the Q&A ready so I can see when someone pops a question in either in the text boxes. As a former college professor, I would like it if you could type your questions in as soon as you have them, because that way when you get the recording of this, which you will get a recording of the webinar within a week, you can have the content, the question, and then you can have my response to the question. And they will all be together to help reinforce the learning. We may or may not have time for further questions at the end. We'll see how things go. So let us begin, shall we? So when you get to your chapter 4, roughly your chapter 4 of your dissertation, which is your results chapter, we're going to go through step by step, section by section. And these are the sections that you have: the introduction, the setting, the demographics, the data collection, data analysis, results, trustworthiness, and a summary. All academic writing is basically a tripartite structure. You have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. The introduction sets up what you're going to talk about. The body talks about it in detail, and the conclusion summarizes what you just talked about, gives us some sort of a takeaway, and segues into whatever comes next. This is the structure of the paragraph, of the essay, of the article, of the chapter, and of the dissertation. And we can see that mirrored here in the sections where the introduction is the introduction, from setting through trustworthiness is the body, and the summary is the conclusion. And so I like to start by talking about that, because if you can understand sort of the rhetorical structure and function of the sections, it really helps, one, know what you need to do when you write it, and two, it helps alleviate some of the stress of what goes in there, what do I say, why am I doing this? Now, let's move on to the introduction. In the introduction, you have 3 things that you have to accomplish. 1, you have to restate the problem and the purpose of your study. Most schools want you to just copy and paste from chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. They want the problem and the purpose to be stated verbatim. You will remind the readers of your research questions. and then you will preview the sections of the chapter. You know, as I said already, the introduction is your preview. Think of it like the teaser trailer for a movie. You want to give your reader just enough to get them excited, to let them know what this is about, what they're going to see, what they can expect, but you don't want to give away too much. You want to keep them excited, and you want them to propel them into the next section. Another metaphor that I have used with students is the introduction, especially the preview section, is sort of like a roadmap. You are guiding your reader step by step through the way that you're going to be presenting the information. And you want your roadmap to be detailed enough that they can follow along and they know where they are and they know what's left. It's as if you were leading someone, say a small child, through a thick, dense forest, and they're blindfolded. You're holding their hand and you're going step by step. If you do a really good job keeping those steps ordered and detailed, then they'll have no problem following you. But if you're not clear, if you skip steps, if you say, well, my reader is intelligent and educated, so I don't have to go step by step, that's the equivalent of spinning them around at some point randomly and running off and say, find me. Yes, your readers, especially your committee, they've all done this before. Part of going step by step is showing them that you understand how to do this. A lot of times, we think that the dissertation is a be-all, end-all study, but more often than not, what it is it showing the academic community that you know how to do this. And so you are demonstrating your understanding of what is involved in conducting research and in reporting the findings. And so once you've introduced the chapter, this should be about a page. You don't want to spend a lot of time. You want to get to the meat very quickly. We move into discussing the setting. This will be 1 to 2 pages roughly. You'll talk about where you conducted your research, why you chose that site or those sites. Were there any conditions that influenced your research? Maybe having access to sites, maybe not being able to get access to other sites. Were there any conditions that influenced your participants? Did something happen to your participants during data collection? Did they get called away? Did things change? Did maybe someone find out about participation that they got nervous and they backed out? This is where you talk about sort of how the setting played a role in your data. Did anything happen that might impact the interpretation of your results? In your chapter 3, you've talked about your setting. You've talked about a lot of the next few sections, but here is where you get to specify if something different happened. Did something come up that might change the findings? Did you have to change your setting? Did something happen during data collection at the setting, especially did you have to move from a physical location to a virtual location? A lot of people who had plans to conduct research in 2020 and 2021, and still in some places in 2022. With the COVID-19 pandemic, they couldn't do in-person research. They had to switch to virtual, and that changes the setting. So that's something that you could report here because that might change your findings. So these are things that you can think about that hopefully you don't have. Hopefully this will be a very short section where you're just describing the setting. But if something may have happened to affect the interpretation, this is the place where you would mention it. Now, let's talk about the demographics. This is sometimes called descriptive statistics, depending on your school and your discipline. This is where you present a descriptive picture of your participants. You want to describe them with the characteristics relevant to the study, but you also need to maintain confidentiality and anonymity based upon what you told the IRB that you would do. So a lot of times what you'll put here is, I interviewed 13 participants. Their ages range between 37 and 52 years of age. X number identified as male, X number identified as female, this many identified as non-binary or agender. You'll put if let's say you were doing something on special education teachers in the state of Georgia, all identified as special education teachers currently teaching in the state of Georgia, who had between 3 and 7 years of experience. You want to give enough information to help anyone who may decide to see if your study is transferable to their population. You want it to be clear, you want to describe them, but you want to keep their confidentiality, their anonymity. You want to keep all of that private and secure and safe. Depending on what you're doing, you may have participant sketches or profiles. I know some people who do case studies, who do narrative life studies, who do phenomenological studies with only a few participants. They might, or if you're doing ethnography and you had a few key informants, you may provide a participant sketch of your key informants. Key informant A was a Hispanic male, 37 years of age, who lived in Cobb County, Georgia. He'd lived there his entire life. He has a wife and 3 children. Again, you want to describe who these people are in these sketches, but you want to be careful not to give any identifying information. It's not easy. It's a fine line, and it's something that you may have to go back and forth with your chair and your IRB if you choose to do individual participant sketches or profiles. So that's something to think about. This should be about a page. Depending on what you're doing, your field, you may also have a table. We'll talk more about tables toward the end, but you may have a table here. This is one of those places where that might be helpful. If your participants, quote unquote, are just documents, then you can be more descriptive in the documents that you analyzed, as long as there's not any identification of individuals. So once we talk about the demographics, we then move on to describing data collection. Yes, you have described this in your methods chapter, but we need to sort of summarize it again, and we need to do some other discussion here. So the number of participants that were collected from each location, if you had multiple sites, like say you were doing a case study of special education in middle schools in a particular county in Georgia. Maybe you went to 3 different middle schools and interviewed special education teachers there. So how many participants at each location? How many data collection events did you have? Did you interview each participant on a different day, which would be one data collection event per participant? So if you had 13 participants, that could be 13 data collection events. Did you use focus groups? How many focus groups? How did you do 2 interviews per participant? You want to describe both the number of participants from each location and the frequency of times you collected their data. How did you record the data? Cell phone, digital voice recorder, analog voice recorder, video camera. I have one client who actually hand wrote everything that was said in the interview. Did you use Zoom? Did you use Microsoft Teams? Did you use FaceTime? Talk about how you recorded the data. You may also want to say sort of the range of interview times between, say, 47 and 63 minutes. And then we get to this thing. Were there any variations from the plan presented in your methods? Did you have to change anything? Did you change from face-to-face to virtual because of illness, time, COVID-19 pandemic? Did something happen that necessitated changing that? Did anything unusual happen? Was an interview interrupted? Was a focus group was an observation cut short because of fire drill that was unannounced? And I'm using education as an example because this is something that I've had happen to clients. They've had to report. We had to cut short an observation because there was an active shooter drill on campus, and that was something that changed the plans. So things like that you didn't expect, or participants couldn't make it, or participants had to back out of the study. Things, did something happen to change your data collection and from what you said you were going to do? Did you plan on using purposive sampling and that didn't work because you couldn't get enough participants, so you had to switch to snowball sampling? So anything that changed, this is where you'll talk about the changes. You'll say what happened, why it happened, and so explain what so that way everyone knows what's going on. This is a step-by-step of what happened, whereas in chapter 3 was a step-by-step of what you planned to happen. Once you've talked about your data collection and discussed any of the changes that have happened, you'll move into discussing the data analysis. So, how did you analyze each type of data? How did you move? We're going to assume you did some sort of qualitative coding because that's what most qualitative studies will do. How did you move from codes to categories to themes? Describe the data analysis process step by step. So if you okay, the first step is familiarizing myself with my data. So I read over the transcripts 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. I made memos of things that stood out that might be codes, that might be recurring themes. Okay, then once I did that, did you upload your transcripts into something like In Vivo or MaxQDA? We are currently working on a qualitative data analysis software that will be ready within the next few months for clients to make use of. But did what software package did you use? If you used one to help manage and analyze your data. So you'll mention that. Okay, once I did that, I began searching for codes by highlighting key phrases and words that seemed to be important in the transcripts. How many codes did you find when you finished looking at it? Okay, at the end of the first round of coding, I found 107 codes. Upon reflection and review, some of the codes were really close together and only had a few entries. So I felt that perhaps they could be joined. Others I felt were so broad that they could have been separated. So after this revision process, I ended up with a total of 95 codes as my final code count. The next step was to group the codes into larger categories. And you'll describe how many categories, as you did that, define your themes. Given that with most qualitative studies, you want around 6, maybe 7 themes max, depending on how many codes and how many participants that can change. But so we'll say 6 themes. How many themes, how did you group them? What were the total number of themes that you found? Okay, once you've done that, then you'll go, okay, the next step is to describe, define, and name the themes. You'll talk about doing that. You may have a table at this point that will say, here's the final code list. Here's the codes arranged by themes. Maybe you'll have the theme with a description and a couple of representative excerpts to sort of give people a taste of what each theme has. And then, of course, you'll say that the final step in data analysis is drafting up the report, which will be presented in the remainder of this chapter. And so you will then present the results. For some schools, they call this presenting the findings. Whatever your transcript calls it is what you will use. So there are a couple ways you can do it. The two most common, if you have more than one research question, you group your themes by research question. And so the following themes responded to research question 1. Da-na-na-na-na. And then you'll talk about those. Then the following themes responded to research question 2, then to research question 3, and so on and so forth. Or you can arrange them by category, by theme, by coded element, or if you're doing, say, a concept, if you're doing grounded theory, you could do it by essence if you're doing phenomenology. There needs to be a logic. Think about this, even though you are simply reporting the findings, think about the way that you plan on presenting them. There should be a logical order that is clear. Maybe you're going to start with the fewest number of excerpts, so the smallest theme, and move to the largest. Maybe you want to start with the most represented theme. Maybe a specific order of the themes will tell a logical progression from, say, let's say you're doing something with some sort of medical research of people going through their perceptions of the efficacy of a cardiac of a heart attack and treatment rehabilitation program. So from initial diagnosis to enrollment in the program, the first few weeks in the program, the next few weeks, the end of the program, plans to continue the treatment plan after the program. Maybe there is a logical progression that moves in a narrative order. So think about what your findings have and the best way to present them. And that is something that, as with any type of structure of this type of thing, I always tell students, take a bunch of sheets of paper with, say, theme 1, theme 2, theme 3, and so forth. One theme and your description of it on each sheet of paper, and then arrange them in different orders to see what looks to you to be the strongest arrangement that you can make. There is no one correct way to arrange your findings. That's one of the beautiful and yet frustrating rhetorical things about academic writing. You have the freedom to arrange your findings in different ways, but you have the burden of figuring out what is going to be the best way. And that's something that you have to do each time. And it's something that you get better at the more times you do it. Don't do more than one dissertation, only do one. But each time you conduct a study, each time you write up a report, you have to keep figuring out the best and most rhetorically powerful way to present the findings. And so these are things to think about. You may have multiple ways. If you get stuck, we're here to support you. Your chair is there to support you. And, as long as you go with something and say, hey, I'm stuck on the best way to arrange this. Here are my themes. Here's a description of my themes. Here are some of the things I'm considering for arrangement. What do you think? One of the best ways to get feedback from a chair in a timely manner is to not just say, I need help, but to be specific in what you're asking and give them as much information as you can when you're asking for help. When I was a professor, the more information I got from a student, the better help I could provide in a swift turnaround time. Because I didn't have to keep asking, well, what do you mean you need help? Where are you in the results process? Okay, you're writing up your findings. Have you finished your analysis? Okay, well, what did you find? What do your themes say? So the more detail you can provide, the better chance you have of getting good, swift feedback. So when you are drafting up your findings section, you're presenting the data, most of it needs to be in your own words. You need to be writing up, this was my first theme, here's what it means, here's my description of it, here, this many sub themes were found within it, they talked about this, blah, things of that nature. And then you will support the claims you make by presenting quotes from your participants, excerpts from documents, photographs from observations, and things of that nature. You want to have a good amount of all of these things, depending on how impactful you think a theme is. Like I said, if you think this is the biggest, most important theme, you're probably going to have a lot of excerpts to choose from. You will probably not have space to put all of your excerpts, so you need to choose the best, most representative excerpts. These are things so that, again, pick the best research and findings and quotes and evidence to support your claims, because you are claiming that these are the themes that emerge from the data. So you need to then demonstrate that with evidence from the data. You may, depending on your field, depending on if you're doing more critical than just simply qualitative, depending on your chair, your department, they may want you to discuss the data and provide some brief interpretations. They may not. So that's one thing that's one thing to ask your chair beforehand. If you have a really good and detailed template from your school, it should tell you that they expect you to do that. Not all do, and not all tell you in that level of detail. So don't be afraid to ask. And again, when you present your findings, there should be a logical, clear order that the reader can pick up on. You are telling the narrative of the findings. You are presenting this as the expert. You conducted the study. You analyzed the data. Your readers did not do that. So everything needs to be logical and it needs to be clear. I've mentioned the hand holding metaphor before. I'll say it again. You're holding their hand and you're guiding them from start to finish so that they can see the data that emerged from, so they can see the findings that emerged from the data that you collected. You are still making an argument that this was emergent, and that needs to be clear as you go from start to finish, so there are no questions. Now, we do need to talk about some of the fun things that happen in qualitative research. Discrepant, negative cases. Some cases may really just oppose your major findings. You may have one or two participants who say the exact opposite of what the others say. We don't discount that. We consider the fullness of the experiences and the data that we've collected, and we talk about the importance of these discrepant cases. They may lead to alternative explanations. They can illustrate variations in experience. Not everyone experiences a phenomenon in the same way. So when you find these discrepancies, you discuss them in their context. Maybe this points to future research directions. Maybe this points to the fact that something that was believed to be simple and straightforward is more complex than people have previously thought. And so you have to figure out what these discrepancies mean for your study, mean for the data, and mean to the findings. Because they are the experiences of your participants. And again, that is something that has to be decided on a case-by-case basis based upon the context. And so let's talk about some visualization. I've mentioned a few places where you might have tables, maybe like the demographics. You might have a table for that. You might have a table with listing your final codes. You might have a table showing how you group the codes into sub-themes and then into themes. You might have a table with the theme, a description, and a couple of excerpts. Depending on what you're doing, you may have some sort of figure, you may have maps, you may have drawings or photographs. Depending on the research you've conducted, you may have all sorts of different things. If you're doing some sort of historical analysis with manuscripts, maybe you'll have a digitized manuscript page just to show your reader what the manuscript was like, especially if you're doing something with marginalia in a manuscript, something visual like looking at the images in the margins of ancient and medieval manuscripts. Remember, though, that when you have a tape, any type of visual, you can't just plop it into the text. You have to then describe it. You know, Table 1 presents a visualized summary of the demographic information described in this paragraph. Table 2 presents the list of the final code count, so on and so forth. This picture is of participant A's classroom. Be careful not to show images of people as that can be detrimental to privacy. You maybe, and before you even think about just blurring out faces, consult your IRB on whether or not that would be appropriate, because different IRBs may rule differently. Always ask, and when you're doing anything with your research, always try to send it in email so that way you can get a response in writing. So you have something to go back to if some other decision cancels out what you were told. So now let's talk about the last bit of the body, the trustworthiness, because this is essential for qualitative and for all research. So with trustworthiness in qualitative research, we look at credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. Don't just define what these things are. And one thing I see that clients often stumble with is they'll write these sections up, and it will be credibility is the confidence in the accuracy of findings. Various researchers do the following to establish their credibility. Don't tell your readers what various researchers do. Tell them what you did. And these are some of the big ways that we do it. Triangulation. Did you have multiple data sources? Did you have multiple people coding your data? So that way, did you check for intercoder reliability? Things of that nature. How can we determine that your findings are accurate and credible? Transferability. How applicable will your findings be to other contexts? Again, just because you studied middle school special ed teachers in, we'll say, an urban county or an urban school district in northern Georgia, that doesn't mean that those findings will transfer to middle school special ed teachers in an urban county in Alabama, which is just next door to Georgia. So how much detail can you provide on your participants, on the setting? How rich and thick were your descriptions of the findings, of if you did observations of the events you observed? The more detail you provide, the easier it is for a reader to determine transferability. And this is a special place where I've noticed clients often slip up. You cannot determine transferability. Only a reader who is looking at your study can determine if they believe your study is transferable to the context of their research. You can provide all the data you can, and you can here sort of give a summary step-by-step of what you did to help make sure that they understand that you thought about that and you planned for it in your writing. Dependability. How consistent are the findings in replication, as well as you can replicate a qualitative study. Did you provide sufficient information for step by step of how you did it? Did you describe in enough detail both the data collection and data analysis processes? Did you provide an audit trail step by step of everything that you did? So that way, if anyone seeks to replicate your study, they have the best chance of getting not identical, but comparable findings. And confirmability. How neutral were you in reporting your findings to the best of being humanly possible? We are all human. We all have biases that we may or may not be conscious of. Were you consciously aware of your role as a researcher, of whether you were an active participant or a passive participant? Did you make notes of your biases and reflect throughout through maybe a reflexivity journal? Did you engage in member checking? Did you ask your participants to look over your findings to see if that which you found is reflective of their experiences? How confident can your reader be that your findings are based on your participants' experiences and not simply your own beliefs, biases, and ideas? Again, you want to describe what you did. Did the member checking process require you to make some changes and reanalyze the data? That can happen. If it does, you'll also describe that process and, yeah, after that, I had to go and do this. And then a second round of member checking was found that all participants were now happy with the findings as being reflective of their experiences. So this is the final section of your results. And while it may seem to be less important than the actual findings themselves, this is important for showing that you conducted your research and you analyzed your data according to the proper standards of qualitative research. And so that way others who come after you can feel confident in citing your study and in using your findings, applying them to other situations. And now you will move on to your conclusion or your summary. This is where you will again provide the highlights. Tell us what you just told us. Go back through it. What were some of the highlights? What were some of the key findings? Guide us through, again, hey, this qualitative case study looked at this to answer the following the research questions that were blah blah blah. Here are some of the big findings. Paint us a picture. Give us a description. This should also be about a page. Paint a picture of what you found. Give us like sort of the TLDR, as we say on the internet. What's the big picture, the big findings? And then transition and preview to chapter 5, which will be your discussion, your implications, and your suggestions for further research and things of that nature. So these are the stages that you go through in writing your qualitative results chapter. We have gone from the introduction through the sections of the body to the summary or conclusion. You might be asking yourself, well, where do I start? You don't have to start at the beginning. If you break it down section by section, you can write, you could once you've collected your data, maybe you want to write up your demographic sections. Maybe you want to start writing up your section, your demographic, your data collection. You can start small, you can start big. For some people, they want to tackle a big section first to get it out of the way, or go for the small, low-hanging fruit. You can think about free writing, think about brainstorming, writing in small chunks, 15 minutes a day, an hour a day. Regular, consistent, incremental progress moves you farther, faster than irregular, inconsistent bursts. For some people, if you break it down into small sections, you can get that dopamine hit from things you complete quickly. There is a website that I've just discovered a few months ago called Goblin Tools. GOBLINTOOLS. What it does is it lets you enter a task, like say, cleaning the living room, writing an essay, writing a persuasive essay, or preparing a conference talk. And you can be as descriptive as you need to be in what the task is. Writing the results chapter of my qualitative case study dissertation. And then you can choose between 3 and 7 chili peppers for how much help you need. Low spice is 3 chili peppers. I don't need a lot of help. The more peppers you choose, the more help you need. If you can hear meowing, my cat is begging for attention in the background. She's gonna have to wait until we finish. But once you then click on the breakdown, it will then give you a checklist step by step based on how much help you said you needed, what you need to do. And you can click them off, so that way you then you know what you've completed, you know what you need to do. If you get stuck on a step, you can ask it to break that step down into even smaller steps. It's a great resource to help manage your productivity, manage your time, and to keep you from getting overwhelmed. Once again, that is Goblin Tools, GOBLINTOOLS. I don't remember if it's .com or .net, but you type Goblin Tools into Google, it'll be one of the first 3 results. So these are some things to think about. Start small, plan ahead, use resources available to help keep you on task. Regular, incremental progress, slow and steady, gets you finished. It's easier to not feel overwhelmed if you make a little progress each day and can check off something regularly. Trust me, the dopamine and serotonin boost you get from doing that will keep you motivated. And should you need further assistance, I would like to remind you that we at Statistics Solutions are a full-service dissertation consulting company providing graduate students and postgrads with timely editorial support for your dissertation and all other scholarly projects. Okay, here we go. Is Goblin Tools phone friendly? Honestly, Blanca, I do not know. I have never used it on my cell phone. I have used it on my iPad, and I have used it on my laptop. So I've never tried it on my phone. But you do have those options that way. Again, we are a full service dissertation service company. for more information about our services. We will start from topic development and finish all the way with helping you through preparing for your final defense. And we can also help you in turning your dissertation into a publishable article. You can receive a complimentary 30-minute consultation available between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. And again, that is Eastern United States time. You can contact Janine Glaze at the email info@statisticsolutions.com or through the phone number 1-877-437-8622. Once again, that phone number is 1-877-437-8622. And again, you will receive a recording of this webinar within 1 week. So you will have all of this information with the email, with the phone, and all that we have talked about here. We do have a few minutes left, so I do have time for a few questions. Oh, you are so welcome, Felicia. Questions going once, questions going twice. I know it takes a while to type in questions, so. Okay, we have one in the Q&A. If I once had an account with Statistics Solutions but dropped from the university, do I still have an account with funds in it? I do not know that. That would be something that you would need to speak with the sales department with. And again, so info@statisticsolutions.com or the 877 number. Those are the people you would talk to, because in all honesty, as a mentor, I would not have access to that type of account information, but you can contact them and they can tell you. Thank you, Sleeth. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So questions. Ooh, 3 at the end. Okay, let's see. Do we provide dissertation copy editing? Yes, we do provide copy editing. That is part of the services. Do I need code since my questions form my theme? I'm not entirely sure what you mean, Salamat, but normally speaking, your theme is not going to be your questions. Your themes are what emerge from the data. So you would probably still need to code to see what was actually done. So I would still say, yes, you will need codes because there is a research process. Unless yours is very different, which is something that would have to be discussed individually. And as I mentioned, we don't have time to go into the specifics of individual study questions. We have a few minutes left, so probably time for one more question. Do we assist through the entire process, or is this more a la carte? Yes to both, Felicia. Yes to both. You can purchase full dissertation service, or you can purchase only the services that you need. And again, our sales department, they can really help you. They can help you find the services you need so that way you get the best value for your money that will help you out in as timely a way as possible. Okay, let's see. One more question I would say probably have time for. And well, I'm hoping you're recovering well, Felicia. We are more than happy and we are here to assist you in any way that you will need. So once again, going once, going twice. All right, everyone. Thank you for attending. I hope I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and rest of your week. For all of you and from all of us at Statistic Solutions, we wish you the best of luck and great success in your academic, professional, and personal endeavors. Whether you choose to work with us or not, we want the best for you and we want you to succeed. So that said, I will leave you. You can do this. Have a wonderful day and thank you for attending.